Okay, so now you have this set of vocabulary that you're going to be using. So very quickly, let's talk through some of these. So the first one is a rate of change. Now remember that rate of change is slope. Okay, that's how each of the x and y values are changing based on each other. So for example, this is a constant rate of change, meaning for every change in an x value, it moves the exact same amount in the y value. Um, Graph B is not constant, and that just means that if I move 1 here, I might be moving 4 in one direction, but then over here, if I move another one, I might be moving 8 at that point. And so it's not moving a constant amount each time. Okay, so that's a non-constant. So this graph is a little different because it has a constant rate of change to a point, and then it turns around and has a different constant rate of change. Okay, one is a negative and one's a positive rate of change. So that's another way that you might see a rate of change written. Okay, so definition: it's the ratio between a change in one variable relative to a corresponding change in another. It's the slope. Okay, so that's a criteria that you can use for grouping different functions. Okay. So then we move to domain and range, which we've already talked about. So remember, domain is a set of all x values, range is a set of all y values. So remember, we can have a domain of all real numbers. So like this would be an example of domain and range of all real numbers. This has a domain of all real numbers, but the range is going to be specific to something greater than whatever point this is. And then over here, this also has a domain of all real numbers, but the range is actually going to be a little bit different. So there's just a few examples of what a domain and range might look like. And we've covered that. You can use your flowcharts on domain and range to help you. Okay, then we talk about minimums and maximums. So minimum and maximum. A minimum point is the lowest y-coordinate on a graph, just like it sounds, and maximum is the largest or the highest y-coordinate on a graph. So if you look here, because this graph keeps going forever, it doesn't have a minimum or a maximum, so no minimum or maximum. This point has one lowest point, and it's a minimum, all right? And this one has one highest point, so it's a maximum. So that's a minimum and a maximum. Then we look at intercepts. And so intercepts are where the graph crosses either the x or the y-axis. So an x-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis, and the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, so this would be an x-intercept, and it's written with the x value, and then the y value is 0, and then y-axis is going to be a 0 for the x value, and then whatever the y value wherever it crosses the y-axis. So that's the y-intercept. So this is how we write them. X-intercept is x comma 0. Y-intercept is always going to be 0 comma y. So if you look at these graphs, they have one y-intercept. It crosses the y-axis in one place. Over here, crosses the y-axis in one place. And so it crosses at 0 comma 0 here. But here it crosses at 0 comma 3. Okay, at ordered pairs at 0, 3. Over here, we're looking at x-intercepts. So it crosses the x-axis right here. It touches the x-axis, which is still considered an intercept. And then this one actually has two x-intercepts. And so if you remember, sometimes we call an x-intercept a 0, okay, or a solution or a root. All of those are terms that we use. And so these are zeros. All right, so that's intercepts. Some more vocabulary that we have is going to be symmetry. Okay, and symmetry is something that you would have learned about earlier. It just means that the graph remains unchanged after reflection about a line, whether it's a vertical line or a horizontal line, just depends. And so here, this graph, if we were to draw a line at x equals 3, it would be symmetrical on the left and the right side. Okay. On this one, no matter where I draw a line, it's not going to have symmetry. Okay, so it does not have any lines of symmetry. And then here, if I do a a line on the y-axis or at x equals 0, then I'm going to have symmetry on that line. Okay. And then the last one we're going to talk about is a turning point. So a turning point is where the graph changes direction. So if you see the graph is moving positive here, and then at some point it changes and starts moving in a negative direction, that's the turning point. It's at 2, 7. Okay. Here, the graph is moving, it looks like there's a turning point, but you're actually moving in a negative direction the entire time. So does not have a turning point on this one. And then here we're moving in a negative direction, and then turning point, and we start moving positive. So the turning point here is at 0, 0. Okay, so that is turning point. So all of that is the vocabulary that we're going to be using to sort those graphs again.